Well, Francisco Suarez was a Jesuit thinker of the 16th, 17th century. Great thinker because he did for metaphysics what someone like Thomas Aquinas did for theology, that is to say, he systematized it all, and so as certain historians of philosophy, such as Etienne Gilson said, Suarez basically knew everyone. So to read Suarez the philosopher, as well as the theologian, is not only to be presented with a great kind of original system and vision for philosophy and theology, but it's also to be introduced to the entire history of thought, both philosophical and theology, that preceded him. For me, being a student of philosophy, in particular metaphysics, Suarez's Disputationes Metaphysicae have been very important. In particular, what's the nature of being? What's the nature of metaphysics? So I began my career as a student of Etienne Gilson, who was very critical of Suarez, calling him an essentialist and all of the nasty things associated with that. But the more I read Suarez and other thinkers, the more I realized that he was much more complex than that. So I would say for me, the issue of the nature of being, the nature of metaphysics, what falls under its scope, those are the important questions for me. It's difficult to say which are his most important works, since the man wrote so much, and each of them you can say is a masterpiece in its own right, but so definitely works like the Disputationes Metaphysicae have a great deal of historical importance, but also De Legibus, De Gratia, many of his works on theology as well. So it's difficult just to put your finger on one. I think many of them are important to many diverse thinkers. As you can see, the current state of Suarez studies is it's not dominated by any one field: philosophy, theology, law, so on and so forth. But the great thing about him is he has a lot to offer to many areas of thought. So it's difficult to say what the historical importance is, because even to this day, when you mention Francisco Suarez, the first question is, who is he, as we know? And but nevertheless, when you look at thinkers like Martin Heidegger, who said that Suarez's metaphysics is extraordinarily important for modernity, because he is the avenue through which a great deal of Greek thought is transmitted into modernity. But he's much more than that. I think he's not just a channel, but rather, I think, an original thinker unto himself. I think some of the originality of that thought is beginning to emerge now in current research and scholarship. And so, while in Europe there's already a great deal of interest in Suarez, you see some indications of that interest beginning to emerge in the U.S. and other English-speaking parts of the world. So, I think he's important. But much more complex, because whereas Thomas Aquinas speaks in a very, shall we say, simplistically, in a very plain manner, Suarez speaks in a very complicated technical jargon, and I think that's what's somewhat difficult to communicate over to the current situation. But I think definitely he's becoming much more important as time progresses. Today, how would we characterize it? It's, shall we say, a postmodern world. Okay, and so what does that mean? Well, postmodernism is going to be extraordinarily suspicious, I think, of any kind of metaphysical claims, of any claims of certitude and absolute finality. And I think when you look at someone such as Suarez, who's definitely going to be presenting a kind of metaphysical system, he would, at the surface value, seem to fall prey to many of the postmodern accusations of metaphysical violence. But I think when you look more closely at Suarez, you see an astute thinker who's able to make a number of distinctions. One who realizes that his own project is at the service of something greater and always recognizes the limitations of human understanding. Is it relevant today? I think insofar as many areas of thought require metaphysics in order to get their project off the ground. You can think of something like theology. Yes, it's crucial. And I think Suarez provides us with the means of beginning, not necessarily the final word, but the means of beginning a dialogue with those who would be suspicious of metaphysics. And so Suarez represents a kind of return to a pre-modern form of metaphysics that might be able to avoid some of the snares and traps that postmodernists would see metaphysicians falling prey to.